Before we can talk about what the best Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode is, it needs to be said that Star Trek Deep Space Nine was a game-changing entry in the Star Trek canon. While Star Trek The Next Generation and Star Trek Voyager continued with the more traditional space adventure tone that had been set by Star Trek the original series.
So, what's next? I don't know.
This series went a very different route with its approach.
I guess we're about to find out.
It was the first Star Trek series to handle more long-form serialized storytelling.
And we're still friends.
And that decision meant the show was going to attempt an equal level of complication with its characters and themes. And while it wasn't exactly discarded by audiences during its 7-season run, Star Trek Deep Space Nine didn't quite achieve the acclaim and acceptance from fans that previous Star Trek series had enjoyed.
I'm a role model.
However, time was extremely kind to the show.
Fire!
And it's now been reclaimed as one of the best entries in the entire Star Trek library. There are even some fans, myself included, that consider it the high point of Star Trek on television. So how do you even begin to pick the best episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine? This isn't like Star Trek the original series where there is a clear frontrunner, but that's for another video. This series has such a wide variety of episodes that choosing one has to mean deciding on specific criteria. Do you go with one of the key episodes in the overarching Dominion War storyline, like the often #1 favorite episode in The Pale Moonlight?
Because I can live with it.
Or the pivotal Sacrifice of Angels? What about the more focused character entries, like the morally complex Duet? Or the heartbreaking and emotional The Visitor?
You okay, Dad?
I am now, Jake.
Or even more tempting, the enjoyable lighthearted episodes, like the celebratory Trials and Tribulations.
I love classic 23rd century design. Black finish, silver highlights.
Thanks.
Or a personal favorite and easy rewatch, Take Me Out to the Holosuite. Any of those are worthy candidates, but if there is one entry that could be called the best Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode, it would have to be one that demonstrates the moral complexity and heart of the show all at once.
Dear Quark, I used parts of your disruptor to fix the replicators. Will return them soon, Rom.
It would be an episode that strikes to the core of why Star Trek as an idea is important.
That future, that space station, all those people, they exist in here, in my mind.
An hour of television that challenges the audience in a way no other episode has done before. I'm Drew Deitch for Giant Freakin' Robot, and this is why the best Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode is Far Beyond the Stars.
We shall see.
Star Trek Deep Space Nine made it a point to critically examine a lot of the institutional beliefs of the Federation and Starfleet.
If you drink enough of it, you begin to like it.
It's insidious.
That's one of the reasons it came across as antagonistic at times to long-term fans. This was a show that was really dissecting the optimistic societal concepts Gene Roddenberry had established with his original vision. And while this critical viewpoint never skewed so far that it seemed outright disdainful towards Star Trek, like a certain movie I talked about recently, Far Beyond the Stars created a scenario that looked straight into the eyes of the audience and asked them, is this bright future nothing but a fantasy? Because the world you live in, viewer, is far from this. The premise of Far Beyond the Stars has Captain Benjamin Sisko grieving for the death of a friend in Starfleet. It's devastating enough that he considers resigning from his position.
Maybe it's time for me to step down. Let someone else make the tough calls.
Sisko doesn't see the good in what he's doing and wonders if any real progress in the long-standing Dominion War is being made due to his actions. Suddenly, he begins to have visions of himself as a black science fiction writer in 1953 America named Benny Russell. It's implied that this is a vision being given to Sisko by the Prophets, the aliens that live inside the wormhole just outside of Deep Space Nine.
Your neural patterns are similar to those you experienced last year.
You mean when I was having those visions about Voyager?
Star Trek has often played around with time travel and peeks into Earth's past, but Far Beyond the Stars takes it a step further by muddying the waters of what exactly is happening with Sisko and Benny.
Catch the game?
This ambiguity actually allows Star Trek Deep Space Nine to escape from common continuity restraints and simply tell the best version of the story it wants to tell.
Where'd he go?
Far Beyond the Stars strips away the pie-in-the-sky hopefulness of Star Trek and reframes Deep Space Nine's attitude through historical fiction.
But the fact of the matter is, in Far Beyond the Stars, that you have a man who essentially was conceiving of something far beyond what people around him had ever imagined. And therefore, they thought he was crazy.
In this way, it takes the fiction of everything and crafts it into something real. Instead of having to rely on allegory or metaphor, Far Beyond the Stars frees writers Ira Steven Behr and Hans Beimler to be completely pointed with their views on American institutional problems.
You know, the people talked about it was about racism, but maybe so, maybe not. This is America, more importantly. And, and racism is one of the things that we deal with, just like sexism is one of the things we deal with. I mean, those things are inextricably connected to who we are. And when we start to talk about who we are, we have to face those issues in terms of behavior and what people do. Because color has little to do with it.
Nothing has to be disguised as aliens or obfuscated by the fantasy of it all. This is Star Trek at its most real. Actors hate to be pigeonholed, and Far Beyond the Stars lets everyone stretch their creative legs and showcase a new side to their talent.
Have you lost your mind?
This is especially true for the many Trek actors that are usually covered up in a lot of prosthetic makeup appliances. Getting to see Armin Shimmerman and Renee Auberjonois butt heads outside of their Quark and Odo makeup is delightful.
Paps, get out here.
What's wrong now, Herb?
I'll give you one guess.
Oh, the Battle of the Donuts, round 28.
The same goes for everyone in the ensemble, as they aren't just playing 1950s proxies of their Deep Space Nine characters.
Hear the game last night? Went 2 for 4. Rob Snyder of the Tater. Should have heard the crowd.
Death to the opposition.
They all get to do something very different for an episode.
Hey, Benny, you want to buy a watch?
And their energy and enthusiasm for it shines through. Part of that might come from the episode's director, Avery Brooks.
Ira Behr came to me. He said, I have this idea, and I want to know whether you are interested because you will be in front of the camera, but I also want to know if you want to direct it. I said, well, okay.
Having Brooks direct the episode will prove vital considering its messaging, but it's also a key reason why the performances in Far Beyond the Stars feel so vibrant. Brooks understands the acting process as a director, and it guides his directorial decisions throughout the episode. Slightly longer takes and great use of close-ups accentuate the power of this outing. It can be hard to flex your creative muscles as a television director with a show like Deep Space Nine, because you can't color too far outside the lines.
Oh, can I help it if my lobes burn for you?
But Brooks finds clever ideas that enhance the art of it all. For example, the emergence of a character out of a shadowy alleyway is one of the episode's most ominous moments, and it helps Far Beyond the Stars stand out just a little bit more. However, those elements are merely the beautiful wrapping paper on the enormous present that is this Deep Space Nine episode. Far Beyond the Stars strips away the facade of Star Trek and crafts a tale that asks us to consider what life must be like for a black man in 20th century America. Benny Russell loves to write science fiction, but his publisher won't print a picture of him in the magazine. Why?
It's not personal, Benny, but as far as our readers are concerned, Benny Russell is as white as they are. Let's just keep it that way.
There's even a sly bit of self-critique when Nana Visitor's author character, Kay Eaton, is also left out of the picture array because...
God forbid the public ever finds out that K.C. Hunter is a woman.
This is a direct reference to Star Trek the Original Series writer D.C. Fontana, who also disguised her gender in her screen credit.
I ran into the thing of, well, women don't write action adventure. Yes, they do. I just wrote 6 of them. What's your problem? But I wasn't able to submit material under my full name, so I started hiding out behind my initials. And so that became a bit of a pseudonym. And as long as the story was good, people were buying it. So, I didn't have a problem with that either.
And that highlighting of prejudice and hatred is made horrifyingly clear through the story of Benny Russell. He's accosted by police officers outside his place of work for no other reason than the color of his skin.
What's the hurry? That's my drawing. Is that so?
Then, his story about a black space captain named Benjamin Sisko is shot down by his editor because a black captain isn't believable.
People won't accept it. It's not believable.
Later, a friend of Benny's, played by Cyric Lofton, is murdered by those same racist police officers in a moment that feels eternally relevant in regards to our issues with police shootings. This isn't just an episode about race, which Star Trek has tackled going all the way back to the original series. This is a story about how racism is a functional cog in our societal makeup and infrastructure. All of that culminates in one of the most heartbreaking moments in any Star Trek series, and one that certainly helps make this the best Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode.
Why not make them, a dream?
A ray of hope comes when Benny's able to get his story published by turning the entire idea of Benjamin Sisko into a dream.
Would that make a difference?
That depends.
He's excited and proud of what he's done. He's then beaten by those 2 racist police officers. It should be said that they are played by Deep Space Nine villainous actors Mark Alimo and Jeffrey Combs. But Benny returns to work weeks later, thrilled to see his story published in print. That's when it hits.
There isn't any magazine. Not this month, anyway. Mr. Stone had the entire run pulped.
Benny's editor tells him that the monthly issue was pulped because the publisher feels it didn't live up to the,
quote, this issue did not live up to our usual high standards, unquote.
Benny knows this is simply a cover. The issue was trashed because of Benny's story. This leads to a moment that simply needs to be seen.
Don't you understand? It is real. I created it, and it's real.
To break out of pure analysis mode, this moment hits particularly hard for me because I consider myself something of a writer. Though I've never pursued fiction as much as I'd like, I still feel the same power that fiction has as a vehicle for empathy. A quote from Stephen King that I often cling to is, "Fiction is the truth inside the lie." Deep Space Nine uses Far Beyond the Stars to argue for the validity of fiction as something that's more than just escapism.
They're all true. Even the lies. Especially the lies.
The world that Benny created is real to him, just as it's real to us because of our investment in it through watching the series. Benny's breakdown solidifies that feeling in a moment that has to shine as Avery Brooks's most intense acting showcase in Star Trek Deep Space Nine's history. In the documentary What We Left Behind, Nana Visitor talks about how Brooks continued to be in that vulnerable emotional state even after the assistant director had ended the scene.
But how long should I let this go on?
They call cut, and he's not coming out. And I know what that feels like as an actor.
Star Trek Deep Space Nine has a plethora of gut-wrenching acting spotlights in a string of great episodes. But Benny Russell finally being mad as hell and not able to take it anymore is even more powerful today than when it aired. By the end of Far Beyond the Stars, Sisko is back to his regular self and decides to stay with Starfleet and fight the Dominion.
And if I failed?
I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith.
The power of Benny Russell's story has shown him the importance of fighting for what you believe in. But the ending isn't wrapping things up with a pretty bow and walking away. In fact, the ending of Far Beyond the Stars presents a moment of meta-commentary that might be the most valid and effective critical stance Deep Space Nine or any Star Trek show has ever taken.
But I have begun to wonder, What if it wasn't a dream?
But rather that the universe Sisko lives in is the fantasy. Here's the thing. He's right. Star Trek Deep Space Nine is a dream, crafted by talented writers, actors, and filmmakers. The world of Benny Russell is real because it's the world we live in. As Sisko stares out into space, he sees himself as Benny one last time, leaving the audience with a necessary question. What do you want reality to be? Far Beyond the Stars has only grown more potent over the years. Its artistic decisions and challenging attitude continue to stand out among a series that was known for these elements. Deep Space Nine has become heralded for being a complex and difficult series in the Star Trek canon. And I argue that Far Beyond the Stars is the show at its most complex and difficult. That's why it's the best episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Are you already replying why In the Pale Moonlight is the best episode?
It's a fake.
Or are you like me and you legitimately love Take Me Out to the Holosuite? I want to hear your takes on Deep Space Nine, Far Beyond the Stars, and more of Star Trek's best episode in the comments. If you want more videos like this, subscribe to the channel so we can make them happen. Thanks for watching and look forward to seeing you all again in another dream here on Giant Freakin' Robot.
Stay back!